A decade-long surge in methane threatens to make the fight against global warming even harder. Top researchers have warned levels of the potent greenhouse gas in the air rose slowly from 2000 to 2006, but climbed 10 times more quickly over the following decade, according to new research. While previous efforts have tended to focus on carbon dioxide levels in the air, experts warn that methane emissions now needs urgent attention. They say it must be measured and reduced immediately to avoid potentially catastrophic climate changes. Additional attention is urgently needed to quantify and reduce methane emissions, researchers wrote in the Environmental Research Letters Journal, summarizing the findings of a consortium of 81 scientists. The alarming new date comes from a study published in the journal Earth System Science Data. The unexpected and largely unexplained increase was especially sharp in 2014 and 2015. Keeping global warming below 2 degrees Celsius is already a challenging target, they said, referring to the goal set in the 196-nation Paris Climate Pact, which entered into force last month. Such a target will become increasingly difficult if reductions in methane emissions are not also addressed strongly and rapidly. With only 1 degree Celsius of warming above pre-industrial era levels so far, the world has seen an uptick in extreme weather, including droughts, superstorms, heat waves and coastal flooding boosted by rising seas. On current trends, average global temperatures are on track to jump by more than 3 degrees Celsius by 2100, even if national carbon-cutting pledges annexed to the Paris Agreement are honored. Without those pledges, the increase would be much higher. To date, efforts to keep the planet from overheating have focused mostly on the main greenhouse gas carbon dioxide, a byproduct of burning fossil fuels that accounts for at least 70% of warming. But even as CO2 output has started to plateau, methane, which is responsible for about 20% of the increase in global temperatures, is soaring. Indeed, the pace of recent emissions aligns with the most pessimistic scenarios laid out by the UN's top science authority, the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change. Methane is 28 times more efficient at trapping the sun's heat. As with carbon dioxide, Earth naturally absorbs and releases methane, but industrialization and a surging human population have upset a long-standing natural balance, leaving an excess of both heat-trapping gases in the atmosphere. Even if scientists agree that total emissions of methane are rising sharply, they remain uncertain as to why. Today, some 60% of methane originates from human activity, the rest coming from wetlands and other natural sources. About a third of human-generated methane is a byproduct of the fossil fuel industry. Researchers point to a surge in coal-generated power in China, along with leakage from the natural gas fracking boom in the United States. Both these regions are thought to play a role in the sudden hike, said Marielle Sonoy, lead author of the editorial as well as the review, and an assistant professor at the University of Versailles Saint Quentin. But coal-fired plants and leaks from gas production are not sufficient and do not fit with the dramatic increase in the last 2 years, she told AFP. A more likely culprit, the study concluded, is livestock production and agriculture, which together account for nearly 2/3 of man-made methane emissions. A third possibility is a slowdown in the natural chemical reaction in the atmosphere that breaks down methane. A more frightening prospect, that climate change has started to unlock massive natural stores of the gas in subarctic permafrost, has been set aside, said Sonoy. Right now, it is a very minor factor, she told AFP, but there's still a high degree of uncertainty and not necessarily a consensus among scientists. When it comes to climate change, methane's saving grace is that it is much more short-lived in the atmosphere than CO2. That means that actions taken to reduce emissions will show rapid results, the researcher said. Trends in methane emissions should be taken seriously, said Stefan Schweitzky, an expert at the U.S. National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration, whose own estimates of CH4 output, recently published in Nature, are even higher. But we should not forget that we also need to reduce CO2 emissions, no matter what.